the champion live.
305 Fights, where the champions rise, 305, donde surgen los campeones. We on our podcast today, we have Dwight, Sifu Dwight Woods, JKD, Unified Martial Arts Academy. This is great because he's a third guest I have in a series that we want to talk about martial arts, combat sports, the art and science of martial arts, how it's impacted our present condition. Everybody knows that I am the founder of 305 Fights, a sports league, a combat league, and entertainment. And we have shows, MMA shows, grappling shows, kickboxing shows. And we usually have coaches that, MMA coaches, athletes, and gyms. But we started a series to invite instructors that have been in the martial arts for 40 years or more. I had Sensei Armando Martinez of Okinawan Karate Do International. I had Dr. Fernandez of Kodokan Judo. And today, it's my pleasure, a friend, and my honor, Sifu Dwight Woods. Sifu Dwight Woods, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's great to talk to you. There's so much I wanted to talk to you. I was looking forward to this.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start. We're going to start. I want a little bio about Unified Martial Arts Academy. Can you talk to me a little bit about your Unified Martial Arts Academy?
Okay, so we opened up in the warehouse district over by Míami Airport in I think it was April of 1987. So before it was a thing to go to the warehouse to locate your school, we were there, right? And then after that, we moved to Kendall Drive, and we had two Kendall Drive locations, one for maybe about 4 years or so, and then the other one was for 20 years, right? So I know a little bit about the semi-private setup for a school, and then the more public stuff being in a commercial location and what have you. And now we are back to our small group roots. So we are now in my friend's gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. over on Bird Road, across the street from Tropical Park.
Correct.
So, yeah, so I've done the whole thing.
Yeah, yes, I know. And I think since 1987, correct?
Yeah, since 87.
Yes. That's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you and some of the old school guys that I know. I'm not old school. I know old school guys. Because how long have you been in the martial arts?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how old I am chronologically. You see, because my psychological age, my chronological age, my emotional age, my financial age, all those things are out of sync. So I have no idea, right? But what I do know is that in 1983, I traveled out to California and became Dan Inosanto's student. And Dan Inosanto, for those of you who might not know, is famous in the martial art for being Bruce Lee's premier disciple.
Correct.
So I could tell you that. I've been with Dan Inosanto for 37 years.
Yeah, and we've known each other for quite some time also. And what I wanted to do is to bring that
I know you from Twin Dragons, Matsubayashi Ryu in North Miami.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Correct. So I wanted to give a perspective for over 30 years in the martial arts, to our present condition, because our purpose is to communicate, educate, and then and entertain. You've been teaching for how long have you been teaching?
So I actually got permission to teach after my first 2 weeks with Dan Inosanto, because at the time I was still living in Barbados. So I flew out to California from Barbados. And so he said to me, "You're the first person from that part of the world that has come to check out our stuff. So one of the best ways for you to learn is to try to show it and explain it to other people. So technically, I was given permission. I wasn't really teaching, but as far as teaching, my first in the JKD world with Dan and Asano, there are four levels of instructor. There's apprentice instructor, associate instructor, and full instructor, and then there's senior full. I was awarded apprentice instructorship in 1985, promoted to associate instructor in 1992, I think, and then full instructor in 1997. So if we go by legitimacy, you could say that I have been teaching for 28 years.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing about it, I think about it, I never thought it would be a day that we would be in the martial arts and be teaching longer than some of the students we have. I have students that are like 20 years old.
Yeah, I make fun of them all the time. Yeah.
And you know, and we've had the pleasure of doing a lot of things together. In fact, remember the movie Only the Strong? Yes,
actually, I did one of my podcasts, the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues, my Friday podcast. I did that 2 weeks ago with Mark Withers. Do you remember Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. I did.
Go ahead.
I did the podcast with him 2 weeks ago.
You know, the curious thing that one of my senior teacher up in Colorado, Seagung Wayne Welch, he's the godfather of Mark Dacascos. One of his first teacher was Al Dacascos. And you know, all these years later, you know, we're in Miami doing Only the Strong, and he becomes an actor and whatnot. Yeah. So it was awesome. Now, what I want to talk about today, later on, I'm going to bring you on the podcast, talk about the Filipino martial arts, all different type of martial arts and their impact on the present condition and in martial arts, like our shows. In our shows, we have MMA, but we also have kickboxing, Muay Thai. We have super grappling fights. We like to promote the martial arts in general. Right. This podcast, I would like to focus on the JKD, and its impact. One of the clips, actually, I'm gonna have a picture I'm going to be showing of you with the front lead jab, which is an interesting technique that's being used now in mixed martial arts. I'm also going to put up a clip of the famous Enter the Dragon scene where Bruce Lee has the trunks on, the gloves on, and he taps the guy out. Yeah. I mean, what year was that?
So they finished. That was released in 1973. About 2 months or so. I think they wrapped filming in late 1972 or early 73, and then Bruce Lee passed away in July, and I think it premiered in August of 73. So yeah.
So in 1973, in the movies, you're basically seeing what we have now, mixed martial arts.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people say that Bruce Lee is the father of MMA, and to be politically correct, so it doesn't ruffle any feathers, I say the American father of MMA, mixed martial arts.
To be even more politically correct, it would be the Chinese American father.
And Jeet Kune Do, if you were to summarize to people out there, what is Jeet Kune Do? How would you summarize that people know what Jeet Kune Do is?
Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's art and philosophy. It is an art and philosophy that espouses well-roundedness, the development of well-roundedness. So well-roundedness as a martial artist, but also well-roundedness as a human being. So that's why to this day, there are people who are interested in Bruce Lee on a physical level, and then there are people who are interested in Bruce Lee on a philosophical level. You know, so if you went to Google and you type in Bruce Lee quotes, you'll be on there for an hour, right? Going through all the quotes and what have you. Likewise, if you type in, you know, Bruce Lee training or Bruce Lee fight or workout like Bruce Lee, again, there's hours worth of material. So it is that ultimate blend, the yin yang aspect, the art and the philosophy, the physical and the spiritual, and all the sub categories, emotional, mental, psychological, all that stuff. But that's my explanation of Jeet Kune Do. Developing well-roundedness.
Excellent. And it gets to the point that I wanted to start with is to talk about Jeet Kune Do as a martial art and martial arts. One of the things that I did is I defined the terms I'm using, because if we define the terms, then we know what we're talking about. I always say that if you don't define what you're saying, you're not saying anything and you're not hearing nothing.
True.
So what I define as a martial art is it has what you just said, first, philosophy.
Okay.
It has the health aspect. And of course, it has the martial and combat aspect.
Right.
Okay. So to me, Jeet Kune Do is a martial art and a combat sport. The reason I say it's a martial art is basically, most of all, because it has a philosophy based.
Mm-hmm.
It has the health part. It has the combat part. It has different elements of combat. The different elements of striking, kicking, throwing, and weapons. See, all this whole totality, this whole synergy is what I define as a martial art. And it's very interesting you said that, because that's what impacted me. I grew up on the original episodes of Derek Carey and Kung Fu and Bruce Lee. And if you remember all that media, it would give you a philosophical concept first.
Yes.
And then the physical technique, the self-defense, was based on that philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to kind of bring that back into the realm of combat sports and the present condition. What do you think about that idea?
Well, yeah, because see, the thing is, what is it that drives the combat sports athlete? And then what is it that drives the fan of the combat sports athlete? The drive is towards self-improvement. You see? So
Correct.
All of us in what we are actually doing as instructors is providing a vehicle for people to better themselves. You see? Now, there are people who go, oh, that's airy-fairy or whatever it is that they call it, that's soft, right? But at the bottom of the human condition is this longing to be something, to be someone. And that's why we're attracted to people who have achieved something, people who have developed themselves. So we have it in mainstream sports, and now we have it in combat sports, in MMA, which has brought the martial art into the mainstream in the shape of a sport.
Correct.
See?
And then I defined sport as obviously an athletic activity requiring physical prowess and competitive rules. Now, you can be a combat athlete and be a martial artist, or vice versa. You can be a combat athlete and not be a martial artist. What do I define as that? And then I'll get your feedback on that. What I define, you said, for example, Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre, legend in mixed martial arts, a combat athlete. It's a sport that has specific rules. It's based on his physical prowess. But the way he conducts himself, from where he came from being bullied to the way he helps people, how he is empowered himself and is empowering others and bringing these virtues and these philosophies into action, to me, makes him a martial artist that competes in combat sports. What do you think about that aspect?
Well, I mean, aren't there, I don't know what the percentages would be, but it appears to me that there are a lot of top-notch or top-ranked combat athletes who were first martial artists, as in they trained in a traditional system and then moved into the combat sport aspect. I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm sure that as time went by, there were people who came in not from the traditional art, background, but they came in right at the combat athlete part. And so whatever it is that brings with it, sometimes a lot of braggadociousness, they maybe came in with that, but they are not steeped in, let's call it the traditional value system of the classical arts. But again, I'm not as deep into the combat sport world as you are, so I don't know the percentages.
No,
but
that's a perfect explanation, because what I found, for example, in 305 Fights, and if you notice, we have the bow.
Yes.
I put the bow, and it says respect and honor.
Mm-hmm.
So those are virtues, respect and honor. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we do in our event is we explain that we're going to put on a great show, we're going to put on great fights, but no physical or verbal disrespect is going to be allowed. Right. We're going to promote, respect, honor, all the virtues of the martial arts. So you know what people are saying? People are saying, oh, you're bringing the martial arts philosophy back into combat sports, MMA. No, it's always been there. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's just where you came in at.
Yeah.
You were talking about Bruce Lee earlier. You know, if you research, the thing is, you said something in your podcast live that was really good. I was listening to it. You got to do the research. If you do the research and you see how versed Bruce Lee was in Chinese philosophy, in the Tao and Tao Te Ching and whatnot, and he, you would realize that was a basis for his thinking and his development. So that was a basis to the art. That's why I call it a martial art.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. Because again, we talked about the yin yang aspect, and no matter what direction you approach life from, I think it's safe to say that most people are aware that there is the outer life and the inner life. Whether you think of it in terms of religion or spirituality, whether you think of it in terms of a Western ideology or an Eastern ideology, we're still looking at what you just showed in the salutation, right? The warrior and the scholar. So the scholar is a person who does his or her research.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, and that's I'm sorry. That's why I love the part that you were talking about, that what's happening that might be frustrating sometimes is that people are not doing the research. They're not being scholarly about what they're doing. But if you look, like I say, a combat athlete, for example, like Mike Tyson, people say, oh, Mike Tyson, he's a brute, he's an animal, he's a beast. Mike Tyson would sit in a room and study black and white films of old boxers.
Yes.
You would read about the history of these boxers.
Yeah.
He might not seem like it, but he is a scholar.
Yeah. Bruce Lee did the same thing.
Correct.
He did the same thing.
Correct. And now going to JKD as a sport, I think one of the great things that is great, I think, for combat sports is that in its curriculum and its system, like you were mentioning in your talk, it has Junfan kickboxing, it has Filipino, Muay Thai, Savat, different grappling arts. How do you see that Jeet Kune Do as a combat sport?
Okay, so even though Bruce Lee himself was not interested, and now we're talking mid to late 1960s and early 70s. At that time, Bruce Lee himself was not interested in tournament competition. He didn't consider it to be the classical systems to be practical, and he was all about practicality and what have you. So Bruce Lee was not interested in the tournament scene. And so today you will hear people say, well, JKD is not a sport. And because, you'll hear people talk about, you cannot finger jab the eyes and you can't kick the knee in a combat sport. So JKD is not designed for combat sports. And they are right. They are 100% right. However, training like a combat athlete, can enhance your self-defense capabilities. There's no two ways about it. And so Bruce Lee takes some crap from the younger generation because they're like, well, he couldn't be anything because he has no fight record. You know, which is to say that your wife, if she never won a beauty contest, she's not hot. I don't mean, and I'm not being disrespectful to
No, I get it.
Right? Okay, but that's what it's saying. So because the younger generation only has one metric for measuring anything.
Correct.
Oh, you don't have a fight record? Then you're nothing.
See, this is why I was going to enjoy this conversation, and I wanted to get it out there because it's your perspective. And like you said, if it's one dimensional, that's a perspective.
Yeah.
Because you hit on a topic that 40 years later, I realized, coming from a self-defense, classical martial art, how do you train that? You have to train that via combat sports. You said it. The NFL doesn't practice playing games. They practice drills on how to play games. Bruce Lee, if I'm not mistaken, designed a lot of the protective gear, shields, a lot of training equipment that is being used now to practice. And that's what I would call the sports.
Yeah.
For example, I can do a front kick to the groin, but how many times can I really kick you in a sparring to the groin, even with a groin cup? I can't really practice that.
Right.
So I have the combat sport as a practice. Then my tactical considerations, instead of a closed fist jab, is an open hand jab.
Mm-hmm.
You said it comes together. Where I see the value of Jeet Kune Do, and when I say combat sport, is in his mindset of designing the equipment to train, practicing the different elements of kick, trapping, grappling together.
Yeah.
So I see it as a very valid combat sport that is practiced as a martial art of self-defense. What's your idea on that?
Yeah. Well, so the idea behind the use of equipment, and I'll tell you something. So a lot of the equipment, as a matter of fact, if I have right next to me, this is one of my teacher's books, right? And this is probably, I don't know if anybody has done a book similar to this, right? So I'm not sure what it looks like, but a guide to martial arts training with equipment. So what you see here is the naval boxing headgear, right? And then there's the top and bottom bag, the focus mitts, the heavy bag, and the kick shield. So the kick shield is something that Dan Inosanto, because of his time playing football, he adopted the blocking shields from football. He brought those to Bruce Lee. And that's how the kicking shield that every martial arts school has now, right? That has its origins in the JKD world. Likewise, the use of the focus mitts, that was something that Bruce Lee had been exposed to boxing growing up in Hong Kong. And Sifu Inosanto also had been exposed to boxing. And so they adopted that. In the 1980s, as he traveled around the world, there was a time when Sifu Inosanto had to take a duffel bag of focus mitts with him as airline luggage because not every school had hand pads. And we're talking about the kids that haven't done the research. They would not know that.
Correct.
You know, because everybody knows you go to RDX, you go to Fairtex, you go to Kong, you know, and you got all the equipment that you need and what have you. But Bruce Lee needed equipment in order to train realistically, because you cannot, like you said, you can't bang people up, right? You'll have nobody to train with.
Correct.
So that's where the equipment came into the JKD clan from.
And you got to a point that in NMS, our 305's gym, the martial arts that I founded, that we practice, we say essence, evolution, and innovation. What happens now is, let's say you have the new school that they're evolved. Okay, you evolve and you're evolving, correct. Mm-hmm. But what is essence of evolution? You got to do your research to see where the evolution came from. as well as that you have to do a research to then innovate and take it further. What I'm going to be showing a clip also. I put a clip on it. It says Bruce Lee's techniques in MMA. What Jeet Kune Do got right. That's the name of the clip.
Oh, I know that. I know that article.
That clip. And it's really cool because it's showing John Jones Bones doing the lead leg side kick to the leg, like a stop kick, the oblique kicks, the lead hand jab. You see all these techniques now being used by elite fighters in MMA that are basically Jeet Kune Do techniques. What's your thought on those?
Well, so privately, right, we make fun of those guys and we ask what took them so long. You know, Bruce Lee's been dead for 47 years and they're only now catching up to the idea, right? But we say that privately, right? But see, here's the thing. Bruce Lee himself said Jeet Kune Do is nothing special. Now, I don't agree with him 100%. Of course it's special. But what he was saying is that he had not invented any brand new way of looking at things. I mean, boxers have been jabbing for decades, you know. Now, Bruce Lee took ideas about the use of the jab from old school people like Jack Dempsey, you know, so the drop step and that kind of stuff. And so Bruce Lee's whole theory was, unlike a modern boxer who is a natural right-hander, so he puts his left side forward, and then the jab is to soften you up, and the cross is to take you out. Bruce Lee was like, nah, I'm a street fighter. I'm not trying to soften him up. I want to take him out as quickly as I can. So I'm putting my right side forward. So in Jeet Kune Do, there are 5 jabs, and there's one jab that is designed to do what the knockout from the rear hand usually does.
Yes. I think, you know what, I think where maybe it's lacking, or maybe, okay, let's put it this way, where they have to do a little bit more research. I think what has happened, in my understanding in the being in the martial arts a little while, is that A, you haven't done the research. B, you said it in your talk, is do you have a system, a curriculum, a methodology? Indirectly, I'm going to add to that, because I don't want to reveal all the secrets here on the podcast. So if they come to 305 Gym or they go to your class, they go to class. When I train MMA fighters, I realized they only have one method of attack. You know, there's 5 basic methods of attack, not just only one method of attack.
Really?
Yeah. So you said 5 methods of the jab. You know, it's having only one methods of defense. I went to your Instagram, and you're talking about the block hit. Now you're talking here about 5 methods of counter offense.
Yes.
So I'm thinking to myself, yes, there are a lot of methods. You know what's happening? What's happening is, and I'm glad we're talking because I wanted to bring it to light, is there's a lot of mutual destruction. That's what I call it. You hit me, I hit you.
Yes.
Where's the defense method? Where's the offense methods? What are the attacking methods? You know, these things I think are essential, not only now, but they can evolve later on. What's your feeling on that technology?
Yeah, well, yeah. See, so that whole thing about the ways of attack, and what I call the ways of counter offense, they show a couple of things. One, they show that when you understand movement, when you understand motion, which is something obviously as the creator of natural motion systems, you understand, then style, even art, makes no difference. You see? So a lot of people hear Bruce Lee say, unless human beings have 4 arms and 4 legs, there's only so many ways you can move. So obviously, whether it's street defense or combat sport, there's still only so many ways that a human being can move. And so if you inform yourself by doing research, people start thinking, oh, so there's more similarity in the arts than there are differences. So what the heck are we arguing about?
Yeah, what are we
Right?
really talking about?
305 Fights, where champions rise.